have the tree that we are meeting today. Take a few seconds and observe this video clip. What do you notice about this tree's bark? You might have known now that I haven't given you the name of this tree. That's because I want you to try to figure out what kind of tree it is. So, oftentimes in the forest, trees will be so tall that we can't see their leaves. So how would we know what kind of tree it is? Look at the markings on the bark. This one's got really deep vertical lines or grooves, and it looks really bumpy. It was super tall too, and its branches were way, way, way up high. Do you know any other trees whose branches are located very high up on the tree? This is a Douglas fir tree, Oregon's state tree. You might have seen it in silhouette on license plates, or maybe you've seen it in your local park or on a hike in the forest. It's one of the most popular trees here in Oregon, and it's also one of the tallest trees we have. They can grow to hundreds of feet. So, this tree can grow really tall, but did you also notice how straight the trunk is all the way up? Straight tree trunk shapes, just like the Douglas firs, are really valuable to loggers or people who cut down trees to use them for wood. When early colonists came to this area, they cut down lots and lots of old, tall Douglas fir trees. Can you think of any consequences from cutting down so many Douglas fir trees? If you were wondering about birds and animals, you're on to something. Many species of birds and animals use Douglas fir trees for food, for habitat, and for a place to put their nests. So these trees are super important for the health and the well-being of wildlife in our area. What about the name Douglas fir? Where do you think that came from? Well, to tell you the truth, this tree is not actually a true fir. Instead, it has its own category. And Douglas comes from a botanist or a plant scientist named David Douglas. But I think this name leaves out some really important history. We know that indigenous people have been living here for thousands of years. I think they probably had a name for this tree way before David Douglas ever even got to know it. So if you're trying to identify this tree, and you can't see the leaves, as is the case with us here, you could feel the bark, and you could look down at the ground around the base of this tree. And if you were to do this underneath of a Douglas fir, you would find Douglas fir cones. Take a look at that cone there. What do you notice about it? If you've seen any other cones from evergreen trees, what's different? Douglas fir trees have a really interesting characteristic on their cones that lets us identify it much easier. And there's actually a story that you can tell that comes along with the Douglas fir cone. And it goes like this. Long ago, a great forest fire was burning through the forest. And the mice, seeing that they wouldn't be able to outrun it, went scurrying through the forest asking all the trees for help. Help us, please, the fire is coming. And when they got to the Douglas fir tree, the Douglas fir said, I will help you. Climb up my tall, strong trunk and hop into my cones. So the mice scurried all the way up the thick Douglas fir bark and jumped into the cones. And all that was left was their tail and their feet sticking out from inside of the cones. So this story is said to come from the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest. and it actually shows us so much about the important knowledge that indigenous people hold about the land. And it tells us a few important lessons about the forest. One of those is that Douglas fir trees are super fire resistant. Could you guess why? Yes, it's their bark. So we saw how Douglas fir has really groovy bark, deep vertical lines, pretty bumpy, and that bark protects them from being damaged by fire on their inner layers. Another cool thing is the way that Douglas fir branches grow. So we noticed that the tree we saw at first, its branches were way up high. Not only does that protect Douglas fir needles from being burnt in a fire, it also allows them to compete for light in a really dense forest. Another important lesson that we can learn from this story is interconnectedness. So we know that in the forest, trees, plants, animals, birds, they all rely on each other and they have special jobs to do. So like we were saying before, Douglas fir provides food and habitat for different animals. Rodents and birds like to eat the seeds inside of the Douglas fir cones. And they help out Douglas fir trees by transporting some of those seeds through their poop to new locations for new trees to grow. Bears like to scrape off all of the outer bark of the Douglas fir tree so that they can get to the inside to eat the sap and the moist inner bark. Wow, Douglas fir trees sure do a lot for the animals of our forest. The Douglas fir even has medicinal properties that can benefit humans. What a cool tree friend to meet, am I right? Next time you're out at your local park or forest, make sure to give the Douglas fir a nice big hug. Thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed meeting my friend Douglas fir. Stay tuned to meet our next tree.